What do you mean by psychological knowledge? Knowledge about the mind, knowledge about myself?
Yes.
Knowledge about what?
Knowledge about myself and living in that knowledge,
Yeah.
and accumulating that knowledge.
Yes. So if you keep on accumulating knowledge about yourself, or about relationships.
Yes, about relationships. So that's it, sir. Would you say such knowledge helps the brain, makes the brain somewhat inactive, somewhat makes the brain shrink.
Puts it into a rut.
Yeah.
But you see, one should see why. What is it about this knowledge that makes so much trouble?
What is this knowledge that makes so much trouble? In relationship, that knowledge does create trouble.
Yes. It gets in the way.
In the way.
Because it fixes the...
Yes.
And also in...
If I have an image about him and I'm related to him, that knowledge is obviously going to impede our it becomes a pattern.
Yes, well, the knowledge about myself and about him and how we are related makes a pattern.
Yes. And therefore that becomes routine, and so it loses its...
Yes, and it occurred to me to see that routine in that area is more dangerous than routine in, say, the area of work.
That's right.
If routine
that's right.
in ordinary work can shrink the brain, then in that area it might do some worse, something worse, because it has a bigger effect. Right?
So can the brain, in the psychological matters, be entirely free from knowledge, from this kind of knowledge? That is, look, I'm a businessman, and I get into the car or bus or a taxi or the tube, and I'm thinking what I'm going to do, whom I'm going to meet, or business talk, and my mind is all the time living in that area. I come home, there's a wife and children, sex and all that. That also becomes a psychological knowledge from which I'm acting. So there is the business, the knowledge of my business and contacts and all that, and also there is the knowledge with regard to my wife and myself, my reactions. So these two are in contradiction. Or I am unaware of these two and just carry on. If I am aware of these two, it becomes a disturbing factor.
Yeah. Well, also people find that it is a routine and they get bored with it and they begin to
divorce
and
the whole circus begins.
And they may hope that by becoming occupied with something else, they can get out of the...
Go to church and go to... any escape is an occupation. So I'm asking whether this psychological knowledge is not a factor of the shrinkage of the brain. Sorry.
Yes, well, it could be a factor, evidently. If ordinary,
it is.
If knowledge of your profession can be a factor, this knowledge is stronger.
Of course, much stronger.
Yes.
When you say psychological knowledge, you are making distinction between psychological knowledge and, let us say, scientific knowledge or factual knowledge.
Of course, that's what we're saying.
Yes, although...
But I'm a little worried about this article and the fact that scientific knowledge and other types of factual knowledge helps to extend or make the brain bigger. That in itself doesn't lead anywhere.
What do you mean?
Though it postpones senility.
What?
Exercising of rational thinking and...
as Dr. Worma explained very carefully, if rational thinking becomes merely a routine, I think logically, and therefore I've learned the trick of that, and I keep on repeating it.
That's what happens to most forms of rational thinking.
Of course.
Yes, I think that, say, that they depend on being continually faced with unexpected problems. You see, like as they said, lawyers are very that their brains last longer because see, they're faced with constantly different problems, and therefore they cannot make it entirely a routine. You see, perhaps eventually they could, but it would take a while.
But sir, just a minute. They may have different clients with different problems but they're acting from that from a knowledge which has this. They're acting from knowledge.
Yes, well, they would say not entirely. They've got to find new facts.
Of course,
and so on.
they're not entirely, but the basis is knowledge, precedents.
Yes.
And book knowledge and various experience with various clients.
But then you would have to say that some other more subtle degeneration of the brain takes place, not merely shrinkage.
That's right. Yes. That's what I want to get at.
Yes, that's right.
That's what I want to get at.
See, there is also what's known is that when a baby is born, the brain cells have very few cross connections. Then they gradually increase in number, and then as a person approaches senility, they begin to go back. So the quality of those cross connections could be wrong. As another example, that would be too subtle to show up in these measurements. But for example, they could become, if you repeated them too often, they would get too fixed.
Are all the brain functions confined to rational forms?
No.
Or are there some functions which are of a different quality?
Well, it's known that, for example, a large part of the brain deals with movement of the body and so on, and with muscles and with various organs, and this part does not shrink with age, you see. But the part that deals with rational thought, if it is not used, does shrink. Now then there may be other functions that are totally unknown. That is, very little is known actually about the brain.
Which we don't touch. Is there a possibility of that sort?
No, what we are saying, what I'm trying to explain it, we're only using one part or very partial of the brain. And that partial activity is the occupation, either rational or irrational, or logical, and so still using the part. And as long as the brain is occupied, it must be in that limited area. Would you say that?
Yes, well then what will happen when it's not occupied? You see that.
That's what we'll go into that.
Yes.
We'll go into that in a minute.
But we can say that it may tend to spend most of the time occupied in that limited set of functions, which are mechanical.
Mechanical,
and,
yes.
That will produce some subtle degeneration of the brain tissue. That since anything like that will affect the brain tissue.